Hello from Zurich to our TCG community. Hello to you and welcome to the next TCG Summit Leaders Talk. My name is Chris Bücker, and I'm the chairman of the TCG Summit and the CEO of Retail Plus, the company that stands behind the summit. Today you are watching us from 31 countries. Today's topic is about leadership. Leadership in unique times. And we have been in these unique times for 7 months now. So we thought it would be very interesting to hear from top leaders in our industry, how they have led their companies, how they have adjusted their operating model, and how they have ensured that their teams remained effective and efficient. I'm delighted that we have been able to put together a great panel of exceptional and true leaders. As always, this panel is going to be moderated by Declan Curry. Any technical issue that might occur during the transmission, please stay calm, bear with us, and we will try to solve it as soon as possible. One last thing, you all know that the TCG Summit had to be postponed to 2021, but what we did not want to postpone is the announcement of the prestigious TCG Awards. Because many of you have achieved great results last year, and we would like to honor the most innovative brands and retailer. We want to honor you, the best. So therefore, we are going to announce the TCG Award winners at the next TCG Summit Leaders Talk in November. More information will be available later on from Declan. That's it from me. Thank you so much for your attention. And I wish you now an informative session. Declan.
Thank you, Chris, and hello everyone, and welcome to the latest TCG Summit Leaders Talk. This is the second edition of our second series. I'm Declan Curry. I'm a journalist and broadcaster. I've been reporting on business and the economy for nearly 30 years. I'm delighted to be your moderator for this discussion today, and I want to thank you so much for giving us your time and your attention. We know how valuable they are. As Chris said, today's theme is leadership in unique times. We will hear some insight from a global business consultancy. Then 4 leaders in your industry will share their experience and perspectives. But we also want to hear from you. We invite you to be part of our discussion. So anytime you wish, please submit your question or your observations using the Q&A function on Zoom, not the chat function on Zoom. Use the Q&A function that's on your screen. And just to remind you that the discussion will be recorded so that others may be able to view it at a later stage. We thank, as always, our strategic partners for their continuing input and for their continuing support. They are Boston Consulting Group, Electrolux, GfK, Groupe SEB, Harman, Intel, and SES Imagotag. And these discussions lead up to the TCG Summit, which will take place in April 2021. We plan to gather once again together in Budapest from the 20th to the 22nd of April next year. However, given the unusual circumstances in which we live and work, we have also selected some fallback dates in case that initial April event has to be delayed. They are in October from the 5th to the 7th. Now, they're very much our plan B, but we are sharing them with you at this stage so that you can pop them in your diary and so it can help you plan your year ahead. As you'd expect, we are watching the situation very closely indeed, but we hope that we will gather from April the 20th to the 22nd of 2021 in Budapest. Now, as Chris said, at the next TCG Leaders Talk on the 19th of November, so just under a month from now, we will have our annual TCG Awards. We will celebrate excellence in 6 different categories, including technology, innovation, sustainability, and leadership. And we will also name the category specialist of the year, the brand of the year, and the retailer of the year. And on your screen now, you can see the companies that have reached the final stage of of the awards this year. Among them, we have AMD and Apple, we have Electrolux and Groupe SEM. You'll also see Harman, Huawei, Microsoft, and Panasonic, to name just a few of the well-established and well-respected names that are on your screen. They are the contenders for the awards this year. They are the names that you will see on the shortlist. And the retailer of the year, well, will that be Coolblue? Will it be Equop Nordic? Will it be M-Video? Will it be MediaMarkt? You'll find out when you join us for the TCG Leaders Talk on the 19th of November. So let's get today's discussion underway. We start with the latest industry insight, and that comes this time from Judith Wallenstein, who is the MD and senior partner of the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. She leads the CEO advisory practice in Europe, which is effectively a mentoring and development program for top leaders. Judith, the floor is yours. Welcome to our discussions.
Thank you very much, Declan. That's very kind. And let me say, look, my daily life is in an industry probably rather different from you, in pharmaceuticals. But I did start my BCG career 22 years ago. Regis, you'll appreciate that. Mystery shopping for washing machines and Darty. So I think that's as close as it gets to the industries you're all in. So Anton, I know you asked me to share my screen, so let me get this done very quickly. And what Chris actually asked me was to say, look, in the discussions with CEOs over the year, how do they look at leadership in unique times? Give you a very quick view on the recurring themes that I hear and set up the discussion with that. Very briefly, we do two things, as Declan said. In the practice, we provide one-on-one support for CEOs transitioning into different CEO roles. And we bring together CEOs in small groups to debate on topics of a successful CEO tenure. I've seen about 80 CEOs across North America and Europe this year on this, and I just thought I share a bit what they talk about. And I'd say first, you know, the first piece that none of you will be surprised about is that actually they say, look, I didn't necessarily want to start a CEO tenure on the 1st of March this year, but actually they stress that leading in COVID on all in all is actually more a privilege than a burden, because it's in a way they feel this crisis has been the making of them, and that the pandemic doesn't fundamentally change what makes a good leader, but it does accelerate many ongoing trends, from digital transformation to the perennial topic of deglobalization. And so they feel that they had to react and grow into that role as leaders much faster. They've also all stressed that some of the fundamental strength of good leaders don't change. And you see, you know, my 5 favorites on this screen, the question of acting early and taking decisive action quickly. Leaders often stress that they prefer to make big moves early in their tenure rather than late. The second one is really this mix of short and long term, right? Really looking at quick wins and immediate gains. And we'll talk about the longer term in a moment. But really, while they do it, working on telling a convincing story for change. Mark Tafani, the CEO of Anglo American, has called this the right balance of a burning platform and a burning ambition for the organization. Then we move to the long term, really. We see that transformational leaders from the beginning also have this emphasis on boosting growth and on setting the company up for long-term success, and really trying, as they move through their tenure in their leadership role, to think like a new CEO who comes from the outside and has a fresh look at the company. And lastly, leaders to understand that fundamental transformation of their businesses is a race without a finish line, is a challenge that works in waves, and where they're not going to be done after a year. Logically, the pandemic adds another you could say stress level to this. And what we see all leaders do is fight with that green line you see, which is basically the interventions governments take to contain subsequent waves of infections of COVID. And then what does that mean for businesses as a whole and for your companies in particular? And we've heard from leaders that obviously, you know, managing this green line as successfully as possible means there's more complexity, there's more disruption to manage, there are faster cycles of decision making, And clearly they have to do all of that with decreased predictability. So what do we hear from CEOs? What they believe is really, what would they call their, let's say, 5 imperatives of leading in these uncertain times? And you see these here. What do we mean with purpose guide actions? What we've heard from leaders is that they feel there is a very strong demand of their organizations to not only keep the business afloat, but also reflect on how they can serve the community around them. And they feel that the company purpose has really risen to the forefront of a lot of discussions with the workforce and added greatly to mobilizing and engaging the employees. The future is now is really that question on how do you manage the crisis while you think about the future? How do you really manage the cash in many businesses while still reflecting on where you can invest for growth? The signals that matter most have a lot to do with how do you take decisions when change happens so much faster, your traditional forecasting doesn't necessarily work, and you will have to look at different sources of data and partly take decisions even in the absence of that. People first, for me, is primarily a big surprise on the notion of talent. We've heard from many leaders that their traditional definition of what they consider the top talent is not what they've seen in the crisis. They actually saw a number of their, what they called their traditional talents, struggling with the task. And people they hadn't necessarily had on the radar screen rise to the occasion, thrive under uncertainty, take decisions faster, work in different teams they hadn't worked in before, and they realized that they had surface people that had overlooked so far in the organization. And then I think more than ever, this crisis has shown that the CEO in a way is the chief communicator of the company, and there was a lot of effort required to meet people remotely, to have smaller circles for deeper exchange, to convey the empathy of leaders in that situation. How does that work practically? And I apologize for this being a bit of a conceptual consultant slide. What leaders tell us, how I pace and sequence in this situation is really critical. And they've described that basically the level of change that usually happens in 5 years, they've now been able to push the organization through that in 5 weeks. But how do you sustain that? How do you move fast, which has a lot to do about mobilizing the organization and the leaders to act early? How do you stretch the organization and find the right stress level, but don't overwhelm them? So how do you support the change capacity of your organization in that journey to ensure that you hit the right windows of opportunity and your teams are agile enough and dynamic enough while they're managing a crisis to see that opportunity for growth in the future? So you see a lot of that comes to that capability of learning quickly, thinking ahead. And then there's 3 themes that I put in the yellow that really come back again and again in discussions with leaders. And that's really on that point of how do we avoid we turn the clock back? We've made a lot of changes in ways of working, in supply relationships, and thoughts of how we go to market, how we've digitized a lot of our go-to-market model. How do we make sure that that isn't all lost when the crisis is over? Many of the leaders have focused on the role of middle managers in this. How do we really understand what drives them so they help institutionalize these changes? And then we're not alone in our businesses. So how do we engage with our customers? How do we engage with suppliers, with other parties who may want to return to the status quo as quickly as possible? And how can we actually sustain some of the changes that we believe are beneficial changes for the business as we move ahead? That finally comes down to some very practical changes, and let me just pick a few of that. On the future focus, we've heard a lot about engaging proactively with the board of directors, not only on the short term, but really on these longer term growth opportunities. When it comes to signal and data, we've heard a lot about how companies strive to preserve the spirit of simplicity and pragmatism, really asking what the essential data is when taking a decision, and pioneering new analytics models, looking at high frequency data such as credit card information to really take the same decision, not based on old complicating forecasting models, but on something a lot more fluid and agile. And then, on people first, really, how do we redefine how we look at talent in the organization? If we've seen so many new people emerge now. How can we make sure that we develop and retain them going forward? So just as a very quick takeaway, I certainly believe what we hear from many leaders. The pandemic hasn't fundamentally changed the rules of the game, but any crisis produces winners and losers a lot more quickly than the peacetime operations, and CEOs really feel that they had to step up to that task. Those who also see managed consistently for the opportunity feel they fare a lot better. I think people also realize that now institutionalizing the changes you've made will be as hard work as managing the crisis in the first place, and baking these changes in the system is a very worthwhile endeavor. So let me close here. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Declan.
Judith, thank you very much. Some superb context there to inform the discussion amongst our panel. So thank you so much for sharing your insight and your wisdom with us. Just to say that Judith's presentation will be emailed to everyone who has registered for this talk. So we say goodbye to Judith at this stage. We now invite you to share some of your experience by answering some questions about your business. I have 4 questions for you, and I urge you to select the answer that is most relevant to you using the voting function on your screen. The first question is this: in your business, what revenue change do you expect for the first half of the year 2021 compared with the same period 2020? Now note, this question refers to the first half of 2021. We have split next year into 2 halves because we expect that your trading in the first half will be compared with the trading that you had in the first half of 2020, some of the worst months of lockdown. So we anticipate that your trading in the first half of 2021 should be much better compared with the previous year. So here are the options for you to select. Will your trading in the first half of 2021 versus the same period 2020 be up by more than 10%, up by more than 5%, about the same, less than 5%, or less than 10%? Do select the one that you anticipate most for your business, the one you think will be the most accurate representation of where your business is heading for your change in revenue for the first half, change in year-on-year revenue for the first half in 2021. Well, I think that's enough time for us to have received your votes. Thank you very much. And there, as we anticipated, more than half of you expect that your year-on-year revenues for the first half of 2021 will be more than 10% higher than the previous year. Thank you very much for that. Only 4% of you think that they will have declined by 10%. Another 4% think of a decline by 5%. So that should give us some grounds for optimism as we plan the year ahead. The second question now will look at the second half of 2021. Again, we'll split it out for the reason that we gave. We expect the second half to be quite different from the first half next year. So looking at the revenue change that you expect year on year for the second half of 2021, do you think that your revenue change will be more than 10%, more than 5%, about the same, less than 5%, less than 10%? So those are the options. Please select one that you anticipate gives the most accurate representation or expectation of where your business is going. This is comparing the change in revenue in the second half of 2021 with the same period in the previous year. So the year-on-year change in revenues for half 2 2021. Let's see what you told us with the answers that you have given us. And there we see quite a different expectation for trade in the second half of next year after that big bounce that many of you expect in the first half. The larger number of you, just under 1/3, think that your trading in the second half of 2021 will be about the same as it was in the second half of 2020, and then honors split between a 5% rise and a 5% drop. 20% of you, though, think that there will be more than a 10% increase. So again, a good boost of optimism there from those of you who are watching us today. Thank you for those answers. We now move on to the third question that we have for you. If you take your online share today as a base, by how much do you think your online share will grow next year? Do you think next year that your online share will be 15 percentage points higher than it is today? Do you think it'll be more than 10 percentage points higher than today? Do you think it'll be more than 5 percentage points higher than today? Do you think it'll be about the same, or do you think it'll be lower than where it is today? Those are the options. Pick the one that is closest fitting to your expectations for your business, and let's see the answers that you have given us. This is for the change in online share next year, and almost all of you expecting an increase in online share compared with where we are today. 1/5 of you think it'll be up by 5 percentage points or less. 1/3 of you think it'll be up by more than 10, and 1/3 of you think your online share will be more than 15 percentage points higher than it is today. Thank you. The final question is asking you to give the reasons as to why the online share may have increased. We want you to pick the 2 main factors that you think will encourage your customers to buy online. So we want you to pick 2 of these answers on the screen. Do you think your customers will be driven online by convenience? In other words, they can buy without having to leave the comfort of their home. Do you think it's because your customers anticipate there is a bigger assortment online than you are physically capable of stocking in store? Do you think customers will go online because they think they'll get a better price online? Do you think customers will go online because they expect a faster speed of delivery? They will get their goods quicker if they order online than if they walk into the store and get them themselves? Or is the reason safety, that people will feel safer ordering online than going into a store? Such is their fear of COVID in the air. So those are the options. You'll have had plenty of time by now to select the 2 that you think are most likely to drive online sales in the year ahead. So let's see what you thought would be the driver of online sales. And convenience is the big winner there. 79% of you, 80% of you thinking that convenience is what drives online, an increase in online shopping. The next option, most popular option, is price with 1/3 of you. And then we have speed of safety, then speed of delivery, and then the range. Safety getting quite a high percentage of the choices there at 30%. So thank you. That's an interesting snapshot of where you think your industry is going in the months ahead. Let's now hear from our panel of industry leaders. They are Remko, who's the Group General Managing Director for Benelux for MediaMarktSaturn. Regis Schultz, who's the President of Retail for the Al-Futtaim Group in Dubai. He is the king of all the categories. We have Carsten Olesen, who's the President of Consumer Audio at Harman International, and Stanislas de Gramont, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Groupe. Gentlemen, all 4 of you are very welcome. Let's take a look at how leadership has changed under COVID, first of all. Regis, let me start with you. How is your leadership style different now from before the pandemic, when you consider all the things that a leader needs to do, managing and motivating staff who are now working remotely, retaining contact with suppliers and customers? How do you think your leadership is different?
Yeah, thank you very much, Declan, for, was the question on me or? Yeah.
It was for Regis, but as you've started...
okay, I thought you were pronouncing my last name, Rijnders.
Remko, you've started, so you shall be allowed to finish. Carry on, and then Regis will come to you next.
I'm sorry for that. I thought you said Rijnders, my last name. Sorry. No. So anyway, thank you very much for the introduction from your side, Declan. I'm very sorry that I spoke before my turn, I would say. Nevertheless, Yeah, a massive change, I would say. A lot of disruption and uncertainty in the market, and yeah, what changed really, not only for my leadership but the whole leadership in our company, also the middle management, is that basically we set priorities completely in a different way. That's, I think, the biggest change. So before we had, I would say, a certain fundament in planning and forecasting. And now we basically focused on short-term, let's say, planning and target setting. So we always call it the 39 days plan. And then after that, we focus on the long-term plan, that everybody knows in a disruption environment, okay, what are the first priorities that we need to focus on? The difficulty is, of course, and at the same time also the possibility that we have is the engagement of the employees when they are working from home. And of course, in our stores, they are still in the stores. And to do that, to make sure that everybody's engaged, we set up a lot of meetings to increase the communication. I'm not a big fan of meetings, but in this case, it's very important that we start, all our middle management start every morning at 8 o'clock with their team, let's say with a WebEx or a Zoom, to make sure that we discuss the major points, but also leave room 20% of the time roundabout just for pure alignment, what you would normally do in a personal setting at the coffee machine. So that, I would say, the two major changes from all the, I would say, the other changes that we did from a leadership perspective.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Regis is grateful for the extra moments he's had to think about his answer to this question. Regis, welcome to the discussion. How has your leadership changed under coronavirus? Regis Schultz.
Yeah, I think that it has been a lot in terms of agility, and I think that in terms of being able to reinvent ourselves and reinvent the way we do things in a much quicker way than we used to. And I think that if I have to give example, you know, I was struggling to put click and collect in all our store, and it's you know, IT was saying this takes a lot of time and all that stuff. And when it happened, and when you don't have a choice, it happened much more quickly. So things which seems to take ages to put in place went live in a matter of days, where it was a matter of months before, or years. And we even been able to do something which was completely impossible to do before, which is to use the store as a click and collect during the night, as a picking for internet during the night, and opening for the customer during the day. And this has, before that, everybody would have said, oh, we need to build a warehouse, we need to have a specific system, we need to blah blah blah, all the things that we usually do. And in that case, we have been able, and it's not a small store because it's an IKEA store in Qatar, been able to operate 24 hours, and half of the time for picking an internet order, and half of the time for customer. And this, I think that at no point of time the team will have accepted to do it if it was before that. So I think that agility, flexibility, and focusing on cash flow, stock management, and just avoiding to go for things which are, I think, nice to have. I think that you are in survival mode, and people are acting in a much different way.
Thank you very much. Some really important themes coming through already from our leaders about how leadership has changed under COVID-19, under coronavirus. We've talked already about the importance of communications within the organization, about the importance of agility and speed. Carsten, Olesen, how has leadership changed as you see it?
It's changed also, I'd say, it's changed over the COVID time. Because when we get in and the whole industry is hit like a hammer in February, March, what you experience there is also, to Regis' point, is hey, we got to manage our cash flow. We got to stop the bleeding, and there's a fair amount of really what you would call acute crisis management, and there's almost like an accident happening. It's disruption in an unprecedented scale. None of us in our lifetime have experienced this multifaceted challenge, because Declan, you were pointing out it before. On one side, of course, you have all your financial objectives, and that doesn't your goals cannot no longer be achieved. But on the other side, you have other questions from your talent retention, and then you have the board that has certain expectations. So what I can say from our side is, in the beginning of the crisis, where none of us really knew, is it all over for 2020, or will we recover in the second half? I remember several discussions about, is it a U recovery or is it V recovery? Because the horizon that you're operating in as a leader is very important, and not being able to say, hey, we're out of this when we come into August is complicated. What we did, of course, was in the beginning of the crisis, an enormous focus on what we call right-sizing our whole supply chain, making sure that we don't drown in net working capital with very few customers. And the second thing, as let's say all our major account, because we are supplier to Remko, to Regis, to Stanislas. With the stores closed, there's the online part open, and how do we engage with our key contact to optimize that flow? And that means also in a matter of very few weeks, all of us was able to varying, of course, degrees of success to reposition investment from the offline space to the online space, and have actually done that very successfully, and with the speed that is very astonishing. So that's the early part. Then we are coming into for us, of course, it was March, second half of March. It was April, May. There was some degree of recovery, and in that month, you keep a very close communication, like town hall meetings, written communication. You issue guidelines how to come to the office or not come to the office. There are also, because all of us are operating in many geographies at the same time, the Scandinavians is doing one thing and the French are doing a second thing, and some countries are doing nothing at all, because they believe it's going to go away when the temperature rises. So when we come into the summer and we see, oh, sales is picking up, stores are opening up, I think most of us were very encouraged by the early result, and we were communicating our enthusiasm under the circumstances that it's not all over. And then we come to July, August, September. The third quarter was better than the whole industry predicted, and just some data points when you think about some of the kind of what you can call doomsday reports that came. House prices are going to drop. All the experts were there. And then house prices in May and June, July just went to the roof. Still does. So we haven't seen anything like that before. But as we are recovering our sales rates over summer, we start thinking about the future, because now you are out of the kind of acute crisis. And we start kind of what's the impact on the longer term, and some of your questions before, what's your expectation to your online business next year compared to this year, first half and second, very relevant questions. Was already relevant before COVID, but has been accelerated. I think we are all there right now, where we are adjusting our strategies, adjusting our investment profiles as we move forward. And from our side, we had in September the best September ever.
Okay, Carsten, thank you. Congratulations on that. It is good to have good news from the industry. Stanislas de Gramont, welcome to the discussion. Let me ask you about your leadership and how is it different? What are the challenges that you have faced, Stanislas, and how have you addressed them?
Well, thank you, Declan. The first thing I would say is that there hasn't been really a change in leadership. There's probably been a concentration and an acceleration of leadership behaviors and actions that were taking place before COVID. And it starts with the drive of a CEO. Our CEO, Thierry de la Tour d'Artaise, has been probably gathering his COMEX 3 or 4 times a week for 2 hours meetings. And that has been cascading down to all the teams in the organization. So I would say, so that's what happened. What happened inside was first empathy with people, with our communities, with our suppliers, with our customers. We had numerous, a multitude of conversations throughout our supply chain and throughout the crisis. We've been fortunate that we have a very substantial business in China, so we've probably experienced the lockdown and the consequences of the lockdown a couple of months before a lot of our peers in the industry, either on the manufacturing or on the retail side. So we were probably in the middle of it since the beginning of February or the back end of January, with all the chaotic impacts on supply chain, etc. The other thing we did was probably to emphasize and to stress things which are part of our genes, being empathic to employees, taking care of the less fortunate employees, being empathic to our communities. We've launched programs to build respirators that have been extremely appreciated internally, because people have just realized that we take care of our communities just as we've been taking care of our business. Maybe another thing that I would say has evolved is we've put speed before elegance. I think some of my colleagues have already said that. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to align and engage, and I think in COVID days we've taken very, very speedy decisions that have been implemented and executed throughout the organization in a matter of hours. We've been closing factories and reopening factories, I would say at the speed of light, but very, very fast. We've been closing hundreds of retail stores with the same speed of light. And that was, I think, one of the traits of the COVID. It's not exactly new in SEB. I think in Groupe SEB, when people take decisions, those decisions tend to happen pretty fast. But I think COVID was an accelerator of that. And maybe the other big thing is be able to keep in mind your vision and the purpose of the company. I think if anything, COVID has put consumer and consumer centricity right in the middle of everything we do. It was before, it is probably, it will be after, but I think in those days where your trade channels, where your distribution goes all over the place, in those days where your marketing goes all over the place, in those days where you don't really know what's going to work next week, what's going to be open, what's going to be closed, which countries are going to be able to supply goods, which countries won't be able to supply goods. In those days, being consumer-centric, in those days, understanding what's the purpose of the company, what's the mission, and engaging and owning the narrative with the employees throughout the crisis was, I think, a key for being able to walk fast into the crisis and walk fast out of the crisis. Last point, not that we are out of the crisis. I think we are still in the middle of the crisis. Probably the peak or the first peak is behind us, but we have no evidence or conviction that the crisis is over or the crisis is behind us. So let's be humble behind and in front of those events. And the motto in our company is, let's keep extremely agile and reactive and listening to what's going on. We still have bi-monthly COMEX meetings, less frequently, but we still have very, very frequent meetings where we analyze and moderate the way the business goes with the same intensity or almost the same intensity as we are doing back in May and June this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Regis Schultz, just a brief thought from you before we move on. You also talked about the importance of agility and speed in decision making. Are you finding, Regis Schultz, that you are also having to empower people and trust people more, given that your workforce is often remote and at a distance? Are you having to trust them more?
Yeah, I think that I would give an example of something which we have done wrong. From day one, we tried to look at what we should do in terms of pay cut, furlough, all the adaptation of our staff costs to the situation. And, you know, we wanted to, I wanted to have one solution for the group. We are operating in Asia and Middle East, so in very different countries. And it was the wrong thing. So, yeah, we have to give up because we wanted to have the same legislation are different. What was happening in different countries keep changing. You know, one of the big examples is that we all feel that Singapore will be fine, and at the end it proved to be where we had been closed for the most time than the other countries. So in a nutshell, we try to find one size solution, and we end up by saying this is a principle we want to apply, and you propose to us, because frankly, and it was the right thing in terms of the way we were thinking to say that it needs to be fair, but at the end, based on the situation in different country, and if there is something I will have to do it differently, is just to try to find solutions. So just to give an example, is we did a holiday a sacrifice, and we feel that that was the right things to do. But in Asia, they have 5 days of holiday, so it doesn't mean anything. So, and at the same moment, in some country you can do furlough, in other one you don't know. In some country you get subsidies, and other not at all. So it's for me, it's an example of where you need to be able to just to say, yeah, the principle is that we care about our people. At the same moment, we need to make sure that we have a future for our business, and that we are not going through insolvency by doing things that are not the right things to do. But at the end, you need to decide.
Okay, thank you very much. As well as managing your businesses, leading your businesses through the coronavirus crisis, you are also leading them through a period of immense and rapid technological change. Remko, Rijnders, let me ask you for your thoughts on this. How do you, at the same time as managing the business through coronavirus, how do you make sure that your business is up to speed and is able to cope with the change that digitization demands?
The first phase, or the first wave of Corona, of course, was a big shock. So to be totally honest, we were not prepared at that time, especially on the pressure on our systems and supply chain due to the, I would say, the doubling of our in-shop shares online. And the rapid growth. Of course, out of that period, what was already mentioned before by my colleagues, that saying, okay, topics that would take a lot of time before went through really fast and were decided really fast. Then afterwards, there came a period of stabilization, and also really looking at the I would say, the customer journeys and the customer feedback. So what happened then we knew with the current structure that we have and the org charts and responsibilities, we would not be able to build that on the long term, because it would put too much stress in the system. So what we did, what I said before, is we selected certain priorities, but I think the biggest change what we did was not a system change. The biggest change is that we reorganized all our org charts, roles and responsibility and KPIs. So that means our whole business was, I would say, we were expecting an acceleration on online growth or digital growth, but it came much faster than we expected. So in the first wave, we have to survive. In the second period, we took the time really to restructure our whole organization, roles, responsibility, KPIs, communication structures, and therefore we brought a lot of stability, I would say, towards suppliers, towards our network, towards our customers, but especially towards our teams, because they knew then, okay, in my new role and responsibility and the communication structures behind, they were able to manage that, I would say, with far more stabilization in such a turbulent time, I would say. So that was the biggest change. And of course, if you change your org chart, roles and responsibilities, you also change certain systems. But that came after to make sure that the systems were embedded in our new structures.
Remko, this brings us to a point that Judith made in her presentation about the importance of making people realize what the purpose is. When you are making all of these changes, how do you make sure that your people realize why it is being done so they are with you on the journey?
Yeah, I think the most important thing what we have done is as teams together is try to understand what we need to achieve and what this acceleration meant towards us. As mentioned before, our targets as an organization did not change, only the speed behind it changed. So what we have done a lot with each other, top down and also bottom up, to define, okay, how did this timing change and what does it really mean for the individuals in our company? Of course, we talked about mission and vision statements, and we talked about the acceleration, and we talked about our behavior towards our employees and our suppliers. But even more important, we talked about the time planning and how this accelerated phase, let's say, infected the individuals in our company and what was expected from them, and also what we did not expect anymore. So we did not put additional workload on top. We took a lot of workload first away from them and then only focused on certain topics that were extremely important. And that was important because that was our mistake that we made in the first phase, that and basically, to be totally honest, we could not do different because nobody expected that, is we put all the additional work to be ready on top of their normal workload. And now we changed the charts, the org charts, and we also said certain things we don't do anymore. So we really, if I make a comparison, of course, we are talking about NPS, long-term goals, don't get me wrong. But on the other side, we acted far more as I always made a comparison towards my team as a private equity company. Just do now what is needed for turnover, what is needed for EBIT, and what is needed for our employees. And that was, I think, an eye-opener for a lot of people in our organization. And I think, as mentioned before, I want to say again, from my side as well, that I fully also realized that the empathy and the recognition that the employees needed, because of course they were working in risky areas, they were of course in a private situation, also a lot of things changed. So there we also put a lot of effort into how we communicate with them and respect them and what they are doing for us. And it helped as well a lot.
Thank you. Regis, Schultz, we've discussed this nature of change before in retail, how you need to accelerate the digitization of the business while still maintaining current operations. How does your operating model need to be adjusted at the Al-Futtaim Group?
I think that it helped everyone to take on board the fact that digital is here to stay and it's important. And I think that in this part of the world, digital was not on top of the way people were thinking. And I think it helps a lot in terms of changing the mindset, adapting to this new world that we are seeing that coming in Europe a little bit before. So that's things. And after that is cost. I think that I think it's emphasized a little bit what has been said before, is that I think we can operate with much less people, much less layer. And I think that has been demonstrated through this crisis, is that at one point of time, you need to be sure that you are looking at what is essential, what is not, and how you make sure that in your model, you take that into consideration in terms of your in the number of layers that you have. The other thing is it creates much more pressure with the landlord, and I think there is a big battle, which is the next one, which is who is going to feel the pain of it. Is it the landlord or is it the retailer? Because at the end, and I said that for a long time already, but I think that it's coming more and more, which is we used to have an asset, which is our store, and it's now becoming a liability. And especially if the landlord is not considering that and is not happy to consider that we are in a new world, and the adjustments, yes, we can adjust our workforce, but that cannot be the only adjustment. And the second, or my first cost is rent.
So what is the answer to your own question? From what you're saying, I'm assuming that you expect that the landlord will have to absorb that change.
I think it's. I think the jury is out. So it's not. It's for us to be. And I've seen it's interesting because I keep following the information, what's happening in France, and France landlord has not. It's interesting that in Middle East, the landlord has been giving us, which I think is fair, which is to say, well, our store were closed. There's no reason why we should pay a rent, because what is the contract between us and the landlord is that they give us traffic. So if there is no traffic in our store open, why we should pay? And it's strange that in France, where everything has been paid by the state has been saying no, landlord can continue to charge rent, and which I don't feel that is right. And I think after that you get to the next step, which is what happened next, because we know that the level of productivity of store is going to be lower for the coming years, and how you adapt to that, and how you make sure that, and we have seen, I think, even post-COVID, I think that transformation rate in store is going up, but traffic is going down. And what's the purpose of our mall is to get the traffic. And I think that for long term, traffic is down, because even by the fact that you need to practice social distancing, but there is not only that. I think that the fact that I think people will be much more reluctant to be in very crowded space and all that stuff. So all the principle which has been built around the mall, which is the more crowded, the better it is. Now you need to unbundle that. You need to make sure that it's not crowded as it used to be. And it has an impact in terms of what the landlord is giving to you, which is the traffic. And traffic definitively is not going to come back. I think sales are coming back, but traffic is not coming back. The transformation rate tend to be much higher, because customers discover e-com, discover the fact that they can prepare their visits. They don't have to visit 3 times to buy something. They can prepare online. Yeah, I think the other thing which I think is great for us who have store, I think when we reopen, customer come back. So that means that that e-com will not be 100% of the business. So I think that we can see the two things is, first, what happened to the relationship between retailer and landlord in terms of what we bring each other to each other. And the second thing is that good news is that as soon as we reopen, customer came back. So that means that they love store, and they will continue to go in our store.
Okay, thank you. Stanislas, when you lead your organization through its digital transformation, how do you achieve what Judith Wallenstein set out as an objective, that you stretch the organization, but you do not overwhelm it with change?
Well, I think the first, again, with being big in China and having as number one and number two customer in China, Alibaba and Jingdong, helps understand the consequences of a business that goes e-com or digital. So we are kind of afraid, but we know what the tide looks like. We see the wave, and we've seen the wave come in China. I think a good way, or the way we try and do it, is to put consumer centricity back in the heart of the organization. It's not so much around digitalization or the rise of e-commerce or the rise of direct to consumer. It's around interacting with consumers and making sure that consumers see value in that interaction with a brand or a retailer or both. And digital is only one of the ways consumers have selected or elected as a way to interact with brands or with companies or with retailers. And in that sense, when you put building this relationship with consumers at the heart of your digitalization, the tools and the processes and the effort becomes what is the same in terms of quantity, but it becomes much more understood and much less overwhelming, just because we put it at the heart of our employees' missions. Yesterday, a strategic marketeer in our company thought that this job was to develop products. Well, today, if you develop products but you don't have any contents attached to this product, you're not going to sell it. Just as surely as if you sell a vacuum cleaner without a box around it or without an engine inside, it won't be a vacuum cleaner ready for sale, right? So contents and content creation becomes an integral part of making a product, be it a new product or an innovation or a core product or a commodity or whatever. So the digitalization becomes not one more thing to do. It becomes an integral thing that is part of doing my business. Like yesterday or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I wouldn't have done a new product launch package without building this wonderful A4 sales folder so that my key account managers could go and sell it to a MediaMart or a Darty or a video. So it's just part of the job of tomorrow. It's just part of the job of our employees. And I think, maybe to conclude, COVID has been great because COVID has raised the sensitivity and the awareness of all the layers of the organization to the use of digital tools. I mean, Zoom and Teams and Skype, I mean, several people didn't know those things existed 6 months ago, and now it's pretty common to do our meetings in that way. The same way as contents was something that was probably less popular 6 months ago than it is today. Today, people talk about our YouTube chain and channel and about our Instagram influencing strategy, and that is because as consumers, we've been much more exposed to those social networks and this digitalization of the world we live in, and as a consequence, as employees, as leaders, as marketeers, as salespeople, well, naturally we've moved into that those shoes, and we are becoming much more digital, even without knowing it.
Okay, thank you very much, Carsten. I just want to get some thoughts from you on how you lead digital transformation when it is becoming faster and faster and becoming more and more complex. What are the top tips?
Well, to go back to some of the elements that were already mentioned that I recognize is really about the consumer and understanding the changes in the consumer journey. And going back before the pandemic, we already saw, let's say, over the past period, 5-10 years, a migration towards online. So this is an acceleration that has happened in few months that normally would have taken 2 to 3 years, just very, very shortly. So of course, from our side, just from kind of budget side, is repositioning certain parts of our budgets to kind of the now stronger engagement channels like social accounts, YouTube, social media in general. This is where our marketing emphasis is lying much stronger now. Declan, you can say that our objective now and as we move forward is really to deepening our digital story in a much more effective manner by using some of the vehicles we used before, but just more with bigger budgets.
Carsten, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their insights on these two big topics of leadership in the modern age, how you lead an organization at a time of great economic and business uncertainty when the workforce is often at a remote distance from their usual place of work or business, and how you lead a digital transformation at the same time. I know you'll join me in thanking Remko, Regis, Schultz, Carsten, Olesen, and Stanislas de Gramont. We also say thank you once again to Judith Wallenstein of BCG. You'll get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording of this discussion and to Judith's presentation. We say thank you once again to our strategic partners. They are Boston Consulting Group, Electrolux, GfK, Groupe, Harman, Intel and SES Imagotag. A reminder that once this discussion ends and you close Zoom, you will get an invitation to complete our exit poll. Please do click on that link and complete the details. We want your feedback. We want your brutally honest opinion. They are hugely important and valuable to us. So please do send that to us after this event. So thank you for joining us again today. We hope to see you all again at the next TCG Leaders Talk. That's on the 19th of November. We will also have our awards. So we will start at the slightly earlier time of 3:40 Central European Time. I'm Declan Curry from the TCG Leaders Summit. Thank you and goodbye.